How do you help when it seems like there's nothing you can do to help? What do you give when it seems like you have nothing to give? I think there's a great story that helps us understand what we can do at difficult times like this when we want to help, we want to support others, we want to encourage other people, we maybe want to raise money, but it doesn't seem like there's any good way to do that, especially when we're not even supposed to leave our homes. So there's a guy named Bill Holden. He grew up in Chicago, and he was a huge Cubs fan, and he was also a teacher. But at some point, he had to quit teaching because his knees had gotten so bad that he couldn't even stand anymore. And so he lost his job as a teacher, and he moved to Arizona. And he was really struggling because he couldn't afford the knee replacement, because he didn't have health insurance, because he didn't have a job, and he couldn't get a job because his knees were so bad he could hardly stand. And at the same time, all he could really do was sit at home, and he was watching the Cubs play on television. And one of the announcers was a guy named Ron Santo. And Ron Santo was a former Cubs player, and he had type 1 diabetes, juvenile diabetes. And the diabetes had gotten so bad that Ron Santo had both legs amputated just below the knee. And this was crushing to Bill Holden. And he thought, this is terrible. Why is this happening? What can I do to help? Now, here's this guy. He's unemployed. He's disabled. He has no money. He has no job. He has no insurance. And instead of thinking, who can help me? He thinks, how do I help Ron Santo? And so what did he decide to do? He had no resources. He had nothing that he could really use to help. It'd be easy for him to say, there's nothing I can do, but that's not what he did. He started walking. He started walking from Arizona to Chicago, 2,100 miles, day after day, week after week, month after month, just carrying a little duffel bag. Sometimes he'd see if someone would drive it for him to the next town, walking as far as he could each day, on knees that were so bad he could hardly stand. Think about the pain. They asked him about the pain, and he said, sure, I'm sore, and sure it hurts, but how can I complain about having sore knees when Ron Santo doesn't have any legs? Yes, I'm suffering, but someone else is suffering more, and I'm going to do what I can to help them. They were doing a documentary on Ron Santo's life at the time, and they found out what Bill Holden was up to, and so they went down and they actually filmed him for this documentary that they were doing on Ron Santo. So he ended up on a documentary, and then ESPN found out through the people who did the documentary what Bill Holden was up to, and they sent a crew down there, and they featured him on SportsCenter, and that's where I saw him. And they had this long segment on Bill Holden's walk and his journey. He ended up getting to Chicago. He got to sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" at the seventh inning stretch. As a celebrity. He ended up raising $250,000 for Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And here's what I think is really fantastic. Somebody in Indiana, a doctor in Indiana, found out what Bill Holden did and volunteered to replace both of Bill's knees for free, because Bill had done so much to help others when he had nothing for himself. And he was willing to suffer because he saw the suffering that other people were going through. That somebody said, hey, I'm going to replace your knees and I'm not going to charge you. I have a friend right now from Entrepreneurs Organization. I don't even actually know how to pronounce her name. I'll probably say it wrong, but it's Magali, Magali. And her company just burned to the ground before this pandemic started. Her whole business, the building, burned to the ground. Think about how devastating that would be. And now her husband's business is struggling because of the pandemic, and there's even been some other personal difficulties and family difficulties that have happened for her recently. I can't even keep track of them all. She's been going through a very, very difficult time, but what she noticed was everybody else is struggling now with this pandemic. What can I do? And so she created these t-shirts. It's called In This Together, and she sells the t-shirts, and then she takes the money that she got from the t-shirts and she buys gift cards for local businesses, and then she gives the gift cards to people who are struggling financially right now and don't have food to eat, or don't have whatever resource that store, that company is offering. She's doing good for others when she's really in need herself. She's being selfless instead of being selfish. She's being thoughtful instead of trying to get something for herself. And I thought that was a great recent example of somebody being like Bill. And just remember that when you're struggling. Sure, I'm sore. Sure, it hurts, but how can I complain about having sore knees when Ron Santo doesn't have any legs? One of the best things we can do is give whatever we have of our time, of our energy. If all we can do is start walking, if all we can do is sell some t-shirts, if all we can do is something seemingly small, what if we just got started? What if we did our best to help others, even when we're sometimes the ones that need help?